Hi everyone, this is my first YouTube video. I'm trying to start a series of talks where I talk about some of the current issues that are going on today in our society and some of the more controversial ones. What we're talking about today is homosexual marriage, or as some call it, the defense of marriage, or marriage rights, or whatever side of the argument you happen to be on. There seems to be a different name for it. So we're gonna talk a little bit today about my opinion anyway. I like getting in discussions like this because that's how I learn. I like speaking with people who have different opinions than myself, because that's the only way I can really form a genuine opinion of my own, is to speak with others who I disagree with. So I'm going to give you my educated opinion, and hopefully some of your responses will help me further my opinion, become a little more educated. So first of all, let me begin by saying that you may not agree with what I have to say. That's fine. That's a good thing. That means that we're learning from each other since we disagree. Secondly, anytime we talk about things that are a little bit hard to discuss, we have to refrain from using certain language. First of all, we have to refrain from using any sort of religious argument. The reason for this is people view religion in a wide variety of ways from a lot of different backgrounds. So because of that, no one really has the same sort of idea about religion. I don't care who you are, I don't care what religion you are. So when you say something like God says this is right or God says this is wrong, it begins to close doors in a lot of different discussions. So we're going to refrain from using any sort of arguments like that. Secondly, we're going to try to refrain from using any sort of blanket value statements like this is fair, or that's absolutely absurd, or that's crazy, or I can't believe that. Now, value statements are okay as long as we have support to back them up, but without any sort of backup or facts to support, we can't just say blanket value statements. Okay, now that we've set that up, let's talk about what we're actually discussing. So we're talking about gay marriage. It's in the news today. It's something that our politicians are discussing pretty heavily. So it's something we need to know about. So before we can talk about what we are discussing, we have to talk about what we are not discussing. First of all, we are not talking about whether or not homosexuality is right or wrong. That's a totally different discussion. Something we can elaborate on later. We are also not talking about whether or not homosexual feelings are right or wrong. Whether or not they're natural or learned, that's a totally different discussion as well. We are also not talking about whether or not homosexual genital contact is right or wrong. Any three of these discussions are not part of what we're talking about. What we are talking about is whether or not a state should support through its taxation a marriage contract, and whether or not it should recognize a man and a man or a woman and a woman together in a marriage contract, and what that means for the state. Now, my opinion, let me begin with, is that I don't support it, and I'm going to discuss some of my reasoning for that. And then once I discuss that, I'm going to bring up some of the typical arguments against, in which case you can comment and let me know what you think. So first of all, let's discuss the reason we have marriage at all to begin with, why it started. It's an age-old tradition from thousands of years ago. Monogamous relationships have been around since the beginning of time, as well as non-monogamous relationships. There's a certain reason why different institutions have decided to support or not support and kind of give a certain label to people. Now, the main reason for this is a natural reason, meaning that a state or an institution, be it a church or a government, wants to support an ideal. And that ideal has been for a long time the procreation of children. For some reason, whether or not this is good or bad, our society and many societies before us have placed a certain value on the marriage unit and the family unit. And for whatever reason, our society has decided that it's valuable for two parents to raise a child together, rather than single mother, single father raising a child on their own. That's obviously debatable, but for some reason our society, and I think still today, values that. So that's the natural reason for marriage, because it's been deemed that two parents are better than one parent. So we need a binding contract to keep those two parents together in order to successfully raise a child. Okay, so that's the first reason for marriage. The second reason for marriage is its historical significance. And what falls into this is religion, and why the state decided to do it in the early 19th century, why the states decided to support it. And we're going to talk about a little bit what that means by the state supporting it. Now, religious organizations have supported marriage because of a variety of biblical doctrine or any other sort of theological doctrine, in the sense that a higher being has, suggested his will to mankind in order for us to do certain things. So we have a religious argument saying, okay, a God or a higher power has said that this is the right way to live your life, and that's in many different cultures and religions says a man and a woman. Now there's that historical perspective, and that's the way it's always been. Now, just because that's the way it's always been doesn't mean that that's the way it should be now. Obviously, there's many different, instances where that's the case. But that's the historical reason why there's marriage. There's religion, and then what I'm about to talk about, the state supporting it. Now, in the early 1900s, that in the United States anyway, our government decided that it was beneficial to give certain tax benefits to couples in order to raise children, going back to that first natural law. So the state decided that it was time to raise funding. What is a state? A state is a governing body that raises taxes and creates laws and does certain things to help society prosper. And it's made up of the people, it's for the people, it's by the people, at least in the United States anyway. So in the early 1900s, it was deemed that our culture valued a marriage unit for a variety of reasons. In order to raise children, in order to, there was commerce going on where a marriage unit and a family unit was commercially was considered a commercially successful unit and can be sold to. So our society and our government decided that a family unit was something we should look to try to preserve. So in order to do that, they decided that we needed to enact laws in order to create a taxing system that brought in money in order to give out benefits, in order to help that family unit survive. Okay, so now when that was done early on, the reason for that was the child. And that's always what it's been, from natural law to the historical perspective to why our government decided to do it in the 1920s and create these benefits was for children. And that's the reason it is today. It's preserved for the last 80 or 90 years. That same reasoning is still there. The benefits are there so that we can successfully raise a child. Now, what is happening today is those who are seeking a homosexual marriage contract from the state are asking for those benefits without the possibility of a child entering the picture. Now, I know I'm going to get the argument that, of course, a homosexual couple can adopt a child, but that was not the original intent of the law. The original intent of the law was to create the possibility and the encouragement of the family unit where a child could be procreated. So just because we have the possibility of an exception does not mean we need to change the whole institution necessarily. So that's basically my argument, is that in a homosexual relationship, there is no possibility of natural childbirth in order to create and preserve that family unit that has been valued for a long time. So that's it. So there's no possibility of that. Now, what clouds the argument are these other things that I think are creeping into this picture. Um, First of all, we hear all the time this is a civil rights issue, that it's a right that someone should be married. Um, Anyone can get married. That's not what we're arguing here. I could go to my best friend and say, hey, we're married. Let's get a priest or a pastor or my sister-in-law to marry us. And if we feel that that is a marriage, then it's a marriage. I mean, whatever accrediting body that we're trying to get to recognize us, we can make that happen. Now, when the state tries to make this credible, the only difference is money becomes involved. That's the only difference. So it's not necessarily a civil rights issue because it's about taxation. It's not about any sort of right. Now that monetary benefit was put there to help with the procreation of children. So it's not a right necessarily. It's a benefit. A benefit and a right are two completely different things. So we have to remember that. Um, Now, another argument I hear all the time is that, well, if we were married, if I could marry my homosexual partner, then I would receive, it would be much easier to have things done. There would be certain legal ramifications that it would just make it easier because I have a marriage contract, and that's how marriage contracts work. They make things easier for the spouse to have done. Well, that's true, but all sorts of these legal avenues can be achieved without a marriage contract. You can hire a lawyer, or you don't even need to really hire a lawyer. You can go do the research yourself and set up these legal parameters, visitation rights being one, or any other sort of legal parameter that you would want to have for a certain person. You can have that done without a marriage contract. Uh, so the marriage contract making it easier for homosexual partners to get things done is not a very viable argument because we're mixing apples and oranges here. You can get all these things without a marriage contract. The only thing the marriage contract does, really, in a sense, that's any different from any other sort of legal avenues, is give monetary benefits. Uh, and those monetary benefits were put in place historically to help with the procreation of children. So to receive those monetary benefits without that possibility, um, in my opinion, is not correct. So there it is. I'll admit I've not done a ton of research on this. I've been to lots of conversations, and this is the sort of thing I run into. So I'm looking for your feedback. Help educate me if you disagree with me, or if you agree with me, let me know, and we'll move on from there. So thank you very much.